but I know you're all very busy. I know there's a lot going on in the building, so I'm very appreciative of your presence here, and we don't want to keep you longer than necessary. I'm Senator Mark Leno, and I'm author of SB 147, which is the Consumer Choice Fire Safety Act, and you'll be hearing more about that in just a moment. I want to recognize some of the folks who are with us today. We have Dr. Vito Barbrauskas, who's a fire safety scientist, Dr. Arlene Bloom, who is with the Green Science Policy Institute and has done much of the chemical research with regard to these toxic flame retardants, Marta Arguello with Physicians for Social Responsibility, Bill Alliot with the Environmental Working Group, and we have Bruce Palmer with the Health Officers Association of California, Richard Huber from the Consumer Federation of California. Have I missed people? We got everybody. And with introduction of this bill, and we just got our number today, SB 147, we have a number of co-sponsors on the bill, and they would include the Green Science Policy Institute, Health Officers Association of California, the Physicians for Social Responsibility, Los Angeles, Friends of the Earth, the Trauma Foundation, and the Consumer Federation of California. So this issue of toxic flame retardants, halogenated flame retardants, is not new to this legislature. We have been trying to deal with the very serious health effects that these biopervasive and bioaccumulative chemicals have on human beings and on the greater environment. In fact, Jean-Michel Cousteau just last year did a documentary on the fact of these chemicals now having serious harmful health effects on killer whales. The largest mammals on this planet are now suffering. The title of his documentary being Flame Retardant Killer Whales. We know that these toxic halogenated flame retardants are linked to cancer and infertility, endocrine disruption, neurological and developmental impairment, lower IQs, learning disabilities. The list is very long. Now, since the creation in 1975 of California's Technical Bulletin 117, TB 117, which is unique to California, no other state has it, no other country has it. And what it is it requires the inner foam of consumer products to be able to withstand an open flame for up to 12 seconds. That is TB 117. Unique to the world, that levels of these chemicals found in breast milk have increased 40-fold over the same time period. The Federal Consumer Product Safety Commission just last year drafted an alternative fire safety standard based on a smolder rather than flame standard. Also last year, the US EPA recommended that consumers actually avoid any products that are labeled with California's TB 117 out of health concerns. And they should avoid those products, but of course here in California, consumers have no other options. Hence the need for this bill. It gives consumers fire-safe choice in their purchasing decisions. That's what this bill will do. Gives consumers a fire-safe choice when making their purchasing decisions. Specifically, the bill will require the Bureau of Home Furnishings by March 1st of 2013 to revise Technical Bulletin 117 to include an alternative standard that can be met without the use of these toxic flame retardants. The way it's written now, manufacturers have virtually no alternative but to pour these very dangerous chemicals into their products, which means that consumers have no choice but to purchase products with these chemicals in them. And then secondly, the bill will also require the Bureau to consider the standard drafted by the Consumer Product Safety Commission. The result of this bill being in statute is it will reduce the costs for manufacturers. They are experiencing ever-increasing costs from the manufacturers of these chemicals who have a virtual monopoly on meeting this fire safety standard. Lower costs for manufacturers translated into lower costs for consumers. It will improve fire safety, and it will also eliminate, finally, or at least begin to reduce. It won't eliminate. I've already said they are biopervasive and bioaccumulative, but it will finally reduce these dangerous chemical pollutants from our bodies and from the global environment. So I could rattle on more and more about this subject, but I think it's probably better if you were to hear some scientists, some experts in this field. And first, I'd like to introduce Dr. Vito Barbrauskas, who has literally written the book on fire safety and is the first PhD in the country to receive his degree, his doctorate degree, in the science of fire safety. So, Dr. Vito Barbrauskas, we're very pleased to have you here today.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you for allowing me to speak before the group here. What I want to tell you very briefly is the situation from the fire safety point of view. After I got my degree at Cal Berkeley, I went on to do research in fire safety for the federal government for an agency called NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology. There I was in charge for many years of the furniture flammability study program that the feds had. And I had a chance to compare furniture that is TB117 versus furniture without fire retardants in the course of my research to actually burn full-scale armchairs and sofas. During that time, I did that comparison, and I found out that there is no benefit in terms of how bad a fire you get. You get as fierce a fire, technical term is heat release rate, with TB117 furniture as with the non-fire retarded furniture. So that was a very big concern of mine. Subsequent to that, I studied the situation some more once I got to be in the private sector. And of course, the context is that there are two factors that you want to consider for fire safety. One is how big is the fire when it starts to burn. The second aspect is, will it burn? In other words, is it resistant to ignition? And the ignition that we have to talk about is small flames. With a big flame, anything is going to burn that as conceivably burnable. But so the California TB117 is a small flame ignition standard. And so you need to consider, does it help maybe because while the fires get very big once it ignites, maybe it's keeping furniture from getting ignited. So that research was not done by me, but was done by the federal government, again, a different agency, Consumer Product Safety Commission, CPSC. They did a study in 1997 where they asked that very same question. They had been petitioned by the fire marshals to investigate whether TB117 should be adopted on a national basis. And they studied that and found out that they actually did burning, again, of furniture. They presented small flames. They looked to see, will this resist or not if it is made with TB117 material. And their conclusion was that no, it does not help to resist ignitions when you make things out of TB117 materials. So it's the answer should be clear, is that there's only two criteria that you can judge if you have achieved something good in terms of improving fire safety, and on neither of these does TB117 have a proven effectiveness. As Senator Leno already started to tell you, there is an alternative. The CPSC has drafted a fabric smolder resistance standard. It's a little bit broader than that, but the bulk of it is fabric smolder resistance standard. I believe that that is a viable technology. There has been good research that the federal government, CPSC, did to make that draft. I think California could well do a positive fire safety service by instituting that draft CPSC standard and adopting it into their regulations. So thank you.
It should also be pointed out that fire-related deaths in homes and offices have decreased significantly in recent years as a result of good policy making in state houses and by the federal government. We now have the requirement for smoke detectors. We have the requirement in new construction for sprinklers that automatically turn on when fires begin. We also now have self-extinguishing cigarettes, which has been the major cause of fire in homes and offices for so many decades. So we've really lowered the risks entirely without even touching TB117. We think now it's time, with fire-related deaths down so significantly, that we address the serious health concerns within these toxic flame retardants. And then I'd like to introduce and also to welcome Bobby Wiest, who's with the California Professional Firefighters, who's with us today as well. The firefighters have been supportive of all of our efforts relative to these toxic flame retardants for many years now, for obvious reasons. They are walking into harm's way to keep all of us safe when there are fires to be put out. It is not conjecture, it is known fact that when these flame retardants burn, they convert to known carcinogens, furans, and dioxins. So even if soot should touch the skin of a firefighter, there is the possibility that cancer can develop. And these firefighters have extraordinarily higher rates than the general population of very specific cancers related to the burning of these flame retardants. We also know that most of the deaths that occur in these fires, both in homes and offices, don't come from the fire. They come from carbon monoxide poisoning. And again, these chemicals emit carbon monoxide when they burn as well. Our next speaker is a good friend of mine and also someone who has been involved with this issue at a global level for so many years now, also responsible for taking these very same chemicals out of children's sleepwear at the United States federal governmental level over 3 decades ago, and was astonished to learn just in recent years that they were now being poured into the pillows that our children are putting their heads on at night, though they are now in chemical-free pajamas. And that would be Dr. Arlene Bloom with Green Science Policy Institute. Thank you, Arlene.
So I'm Arlene Bloom. I'm a visiting scholar in chemistry at UC Berkeley and founded the Green Science Policy Institute. And as Mark said, in the 1970s, did research showing that the flame retardants in kids' pajamas were mutagens, changed DNA, were carcinogens, and they were removed. They were called tris. And tris is indeed back in our furniture and our baby products. Levels up to 12% of, for example, a changing pad that you put a baby on can be chlorinated tris, which is a known carcinogen. These tris chemicals are replaced PBDEs, which were banned by the legislature in 2004 by the Chan bill. All these chemicals, PBDEs, tris, they're the same family as DDT and other persistent pesticides. They're the kinds of molecules that go into your body and stay for weeks, months, years, the rest of your life, and cause serious harm. Indeed, with the case of these flame retardants, we now have human health results. You usually don't get human health results unless you have an industrial chemical like asbestos. But these flame retardants, because they've been in our furniture due to California regulations since the 70s, we're now finding that children with higher levels at birth in their umbilical cord have 4 to 6 less IQ points permanently. And we're finding that women with higher levels take twice as long to get pregnant. Men with higher levels have lower sperm count. This is human data, very unusual. And these chemicals, the major health problem chemical called penta was used primarily to meet TB117. It's since become a global pollutant, polluting the whole planet from its use in our furniture. So California, as Mark said, is the only state with a requirement like this and uniquely responsible for the use of some of the most toxic chemicals ever. The chemicals are what's called semi-volatile. They come out of furniture into dust. We get some on our hands, we ingest them, they end up in our bodies. Californians have the highest levels in the world of these toxic flame retardants in our dust, in our bodies, in our children. The chemicals are really the asbestos of our time. We need to stop putting them in our furniture, and then we need to figure out what to do with all the toxic furniture that's in California homes right now. And this TV117 situation is pretty unique in that consumers have no choice in California but to buy toxic furniture. So my own furniture, I measured it, was like 5% a toxic flame retardant, which meant I had pounds of toxic flame retardant in my house. And I have a young daughter who wants to have children someday, and during pregnancy is when the chemicals are such a problem. And so I got rid of my toxic furniture, but now I don't know how to replace it because I cannot have a chance. In California, I do not have a choice to buy non-toxic furniture. So it's not very comfortable at my house. The other real problem with the chemicals, that, as Vito said, is they don't provide fire safety, and they may actually make fires more dangerous because normally when things burn, you get carbon dioxide and water, which is harmless. But when things burn in the presence of these flame retardants, you get, in a typical scientific experiment, you get twice as much soot, 5 times as much carbon monoxide, and 50 times as much smoke. And what do you think kills people in fires? So if you imagine you're in a hotel room, you smell smoke, you open the door, there's lots of soot and smoke, so you close the door, and then the carbon monoxide kills you. So when products containing these flame retardants burn, and they will burn, we actually have a much more toxic fire situation. So TB117 seems like a lose-lose proposition. It does not provide fire safety, and it provides huge toxicity for us, the environment, and most sadly for our children. So I think it's great that we have such good alternatives, like following what the federal government is doing. California has often taken the lead from the federal government in setting flammability standards. We did a mattress standard, the federal government did one. So the federal government is slowly making a fabric standard, and I think we have an opportunity for California to take the lead in making a smolder standard for fabric, which can give us fire safety without toxicity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bloom. I think that just about says it all, but I do want to allow a few other folks to share some thoughts from their particular perspective. I'd like to invite Marta Arguello, who's from the Physicians for Social Responsibility, followed by Bill Alliot from the Environmental Working Group, and then we'll conclude and, of course, take any questions that you might have.
I'm Marta Arguello, the Executive Director of Physicians for Social Responsibility in Los Angeles. And as an organization, we're deeply committed to the idea that it's better to prevent than to try to cure. And when you think of flame retardants, there actually is no cure because the stuff bioaccumulates, stays in your body and in the environment for a very long time. So we believe that the best prevention is to actually stop exposing so many of our population to these toxic chemicals. We already put our communities and patients in harm's way by exposing them on a regular basis to over 80,000 chemicals that have not been fully tested for their health effects. We require that Californians exposed to such high risk, and we know how to solve the problem in a much smarter way. And if you start to consider the full life cycle of the couches and things that have flame retardants, and I was talking to a friend of mine, we were doing some testing of couches, and one of the requirements is that they bring a new couch. And we thought, well, in our communities, who has a new couch? You get your aunt's couch, your uncle's couch. And so these also have flame retardants, and if they end up in a landfill, they will end up, again, in the environment. So we believe it is much better to prevent these. We're very concerned with the right of women and men to be born without a toxic load. And just recently there was a study that even fetuses now have many of these chemicals are found in their bodies. So this idea that we used to have that somehow the placenta was this very hard barrier, that is not true. And so we can't, if we do not take care of this problem now, we are subjecting future generations to being born with a toxic chemical load. And if you think of, for the communities that I work in Los Angeles, we face many types of health disparities, and including childhood cancers, learning disabilities, asthma, and many of these which are made worse by exposure to these types of chemicals. So we believe that the best medicine is prevention, and that is why we're supporting this bill. Thank you.
I'm Bill Alliot with the Environmental Working Group here in Sacramento. When I heard that walruses, killer whales, porpoises, things that live in the Arctic had flame retardant chemicals in them, I was sad. I saw Jean-Michel Cousteau's presentation about that. And then when I see my daughter jumping up and down on a couch, and I know she's inhaling these things, she's almost 5 years old, I'm outraged. It's just not necessary. We don't smoke, we don't burn candles in our living room. It's a very low fire hazard in our house. We have smoke detectors. We have no choice though. Should I spend thousands of dollars to import a couch from Europe? Meanwhile, one out of 8 consumers live in California, so furniture manufacturers basically what they produce for California produce it for all the states. So California is primarily responsible for the spread of these chemicals around the world now, we know, all the way to the Arctic and Antarctic. And I think Senator Leno's bills in the past, which we strongly supported, and this one are extremely necessary. I'll close with saying the press might want to look into the agency that regulates this. It's the Bureau of Home Furnishings who promulgate these bulletins. Governor Schwarzenegger, I think it was literally on his last day, appointed a new head of that agency. We're wondering if they have the qualifications. We think it might have just been a political move, putting someone, taking care of their own. So we might want to look at the Bureau of Home Furnishings too and see if they're progressive enough. In the meantime, since green chemistry is bogged down at the Department of Toxic Substances Control with no funding, no program, we could wait years until they look at a chemical like this. Years and years. It wasn't really on their radar screen the last year saying we'll look at the bad actor chemicals, the most urgent. We think this is one of the more urgent chemicals to address. So we're glad that Senator Leno's doing something about it. Thank you.
So thanks again for joining us today, and if you have questions, we're happy to take them.
Why not just get rid of TB 117 or repeal TB 117, since you're saying that the smolder test is better anyhow, and I mean, can you do that?
We have tried. The power of the lobby of the chemical manufacturing industry overwhelms this Capitol building. It is just a sad fact of life. It's not unique to California. You can find any number of magazine stories about the fact that they have lobbyists in every state legislature throughout the country to make sure that these kinds of bills don't see the light of day. They spent over $6 million to defeat one of our earlier versions of this bill to try to get rid of these chemicals altogether. And they dressed themselves up with a front group, Californians for Fire Safety, and they spent their $6 million with full-page color ads, television advertisements, radio campaign, direct mail into districts of legislators who were on the committees that would be seeing and hearing these bills. And the message was, this bill will kill your child in a fire. They were very direct. The only one who benefits, the only entity that benefits from TB 117, clearly not consumers, not manufacturers, not the environment, but the deep pockets of one industry. That's the reason TB 117 exists. They have, as I said, a monopoly on this. And last session when we tried, I got bipartisan support because my Republican colleagues realized what we were trying to do was deregulate this industry, not require manufacturers to put the chemicals in. One of my Republican colleagues said, let me just get this straight, Mark. If your bill becomes law and a manufacturer wants to put the chemicals in, he or she can. I said, yes. And if they don't want to and provide consumers with an alternative, they won't have to. Manufacturers will have an option. I said, that's exactly what it is. It's deregulation. And isn't it curious? We hear all these debates about regulation, deregulation. Industry doesn't care what we legislators do as long as it benefits their bottom line. And if it's regulation that benefits their bottom line, as with TB 117, they'll fight to the end to keep it. Thank you for the question. Yes?
What does the new standard look like in terms of, just a mental image of a fire in your couch? What are sort of the technical specs of how it, the new CPSC standard, makes it fires?
I could give it a reasonable shot, but I think probably Dr. Bobrowskis could give us the best answer.
Yeah, it's actually fairly complex if you sit down and read it, because there are all sorts of parts and portions and use of interliners and things like that. But the main thrust is that the fabrics that go into making the top layer of your upholstered furniture should be very resistant to smoldering ignitions. And smoldering ignitions will most commonly come from cigarettes. They can come from a host of other things, but commonly they will come from cigarettes. And what the feds want to do is to make a robust standard that promotes the idea that fire safety will be improved by reducing ignitions due to smolder. And I have reviewed the technical merits of that standard, and I find that it is a good standard. It does have every hallmark of being something that will do what it says it will do.
Anyone else? Yes, Christopher.
Do you know anything about what kind of money is involved, either the cost of, how much is spent on these chemicals, how that affects the cost of products, how much might be saved from getting rid of the standard, any cost to the state from making this change?
I can address the cost of the state, which we believe to be non-existent. So we're well aware that any bill that would have potential costs, even cost pressures, would be held in appropriation. So we believe that the review of Technical Bulletin 117 is already underway. We want to put the requirement of review into statute, so they are already staffed to do this at the Bureau of Home Furnishings. With regard to what percentage of the cost of a piece of furniture is related to the inclusion of these chemicals, anyone want to take a guess? I don't know if we know that percentage.
They make a few $1 billion a year.
It's a multi-billion-dollar industry.
What was the quote from Chemical and Engineering News? There was a recent quote
Could you go to the...
Come on.
A couple quotes. I read Chemical and Engineering News. I'm a chemist, but I never used to read about these industrial chemicals. I used to read all the science. So there was a recent quote that Albemarle's there are three companies basically who profit from the chemical sales, and one is called Albemarle, and it said that their profits had gone up 377% based on the sale of brominated flame retardants. So then there was another good quote not too long ago that another one of the companies called ICL, Israeli Chemicals Limited, had just raised the price of a flame retardant product 25% to cover their global advocacy efforts. So these three companies pretty much can set prices for these chemicals, so that's how they come up with, what was it, $6 million to one lobbyist in 1 quarter. They actually had more than one lobbyist, but they can, anyway, I can give you both of those quotes if you want.
Thank you, Dr. Kluge.
So, but it sounds like that with the choice, though, it's not like you're going to be paying more money to get something that doesn't have the flame retardants in it. I mean, under the new standards or the smoldering. I mean,
The smoldering
it's not going to cost you more money.
No, we think it will save manufacturers money, and it will subsequently save consumers money as well. So just on the fiscal argument, it makes great sense. Again, minimally, I would take your suggestion, get rid of 117 altogether, but short of that, give consumers an option. And I wouldn't be surprised over time, once they have that option, the market would drive manufacturers to make fewer and fewer products with the chemicals than without. If you had a choice, fewer chemicals, less cost, without any risk of additional fire. Yeah.
Senator, can I make a comment?
Of course, Doctor.
The way we see that with the CPSC effort to have a standard that promotes smolder resistance of furniture, what that will do is there won't be any added costs, there won't be any added chemicals. What it will do is it will simply take out of that market some fabrics that are notoriously prone toward smoldering ignitions. So that will be the upshot, that some bad actor fabrics will be eliminated from the furniture market, but the furniture market then as remains, there won't be any added cost to the consumer or to the manufacturer.
One last question? Yes.
Just wondering, are there any plans this session, or does this bill in any way address the baby products with the flame retardants?
I've been told that the 4 juvenile products that we had put into our bill last year to exempt from Technical Bulletin 117, because the Federal Consumer Product Safety Commission had deemed them to be non-flammable products. Why make them comply with a fire safety standard if they are non-flammable, determined by our federal government? That even though that bill failed, thanks to heavy lobbying by the industry, that the Bureau of Home Furnishings have on their own exempted, is that correct?
They've exempted.
They exempted
three products,
some of those same juvenile products.
but this bill will deal with all
Yeah,
the rest.
right.
This bill addresses the changing pads and the boppy things.
All the things that the Bureau has not already exempted.
Okay.
Great. Well, we are, again, very appreciative of your being here today, asking astute questions. And if you have any others, of course, we're around to answer them. Thank you. And thank you to all my guests and experts here today.